our little fireside chat, I wouldn't call it a panel, it's just the three of us, right? And we're talking about, in the theme of what we did this morning, Pari had a very impressive keynote talking about platforms. And I took away from that, looking at platforms, is almost like a seedling that you plant, that you nurture initially, but then takes a life of its own. It is a life of its own, right? The outside forces like the sun and the air kind of nurture it, and it becomes its own thing. You go to collect the fruit from the tree, maybe after having a nice nap underneath it. So it's sort of like a great place to be. But the other half of what he talked about was the talent shortage that we have even here in the Silicon Valley. Only 13,000 people who are really full stack engineers, less than 4,000 people who are really capable of developing AI-related tools. So in this context, I wanted to maybe ask you both the same question. How has a Center of Excellence helped you scale talent? Do you see that as a good tool for scaling talent? I wanted to ask you that first, Sachin.
Sure. So, been through this experience a couple of times in different
You had to hold a little closer. Yeah.
Is this better?
Yeah.
It's better? Okay. So, couple of times that we've been through this experience and across domains, right, to the point where you create some patterns about how to do this, as a center of excellence. And as institutionalized knowledge in a company like Ericsson that I'm part of, we've used acronyms to even describe why centers of excellence helps. We call it ACE, which is the various reasons why you would create these centers of excellence. The biggest one is for us what we call assetization. Sometimes what happens is if you have a certain competence domain distributed across groups, you end up not creating central assets that can live past the people that created it. So that is what we call assetization. The second one, of course, is creating a community of that competence. And perhaps the most common reason why centers of excellence are created are also efficiency reasons, because you don't want to have different pockets within the company spread out doing similar things or the same things. So for sure, centers of excellence are one key instrument in creating platforms.
Yeah. Your point of view, Vijay?
Yeah, and to me, this has been a revelation. Just quick background. Intuit's been in existence for over 35 years, and I've had the privilege of being there for 10. But had a ringside view in the big transformation that we've gone through. When I came into the company, we were essentially a desktop software company, for small businesses, wanting to move into the online and SaaS space, that was an opportunity, for us as we were building our talent, across the world. I set up a center in India. We said, let's dive right into this, right, and see how we can actually help accelerate that journey and that shift. So we've transformed from, the desktop world into largely today an online SaaS world, right, where the apps that we have, QuickBooks and TurboTax, are largely hosted in the public cloud. The mobile transformation that happened 10 years ago with smartphones, and of course the more recent one around data and AI. So in each one of this, I think to me, COEs are really about how do you help accelerate the transformation through a combination of, bringing that disruption within, bringing talent in. I remember the story that I shared with you, Anita, early on.
Yeah, no, I thought that was very interesting, Vijay, because a key part of the story, and I do want you to tell the story, is about how it's not size that matters. You had a COE of just 3 people who could develop mobile apps, and they basically scaled to 900 apps. And maybe that's something everybody here wants to hear.
We didn't really call it a COE, but essentially, when we looked at this opportunity with the iPhone out and, the Android platform was just emerging, at Intuit, we didn't have a single mobile app, that was out there. And we asked the question, why is that? And so what I ended up doing is essentially hiring a talented individual that came in and said, let's start thinking differently. And together with 2 other individuals, we actually ended up doing 2 things. One is we said we want to build this into a mobile-first company, and we trained everyone. I had about 300 at that point on a week-long, boot camp on iOS and Android that everyone, including I, went through. And then the second thing we said is, let's build a mobile app. What is the mobile experience we can give by utilizing the assets we have? So we decided to pick the banking space, and we built an app for the iPad, which actually brought 1,000 plus banks that we serve, small and medium banks in the US, all to have a mobile presence on the App Store by building essentially a white labeled app that they could market to their customers.
This was all done in India?
This was all done by 3 people.
In India?
Right, with the assets that we had with the banking division,
Yeah.
partnering with the business that was based in LA. And we said, we can actually get this to you in 3 months to market. And no one believed it. And we actually did it. And this was an eminently monetizable app because the bank would be essentially paying us for these apps. And we had a really interesting business model that was new to the company. So that actually got everyone believing that, hey, we need to provide mobile first experiences, became a top priority in the company. And very soon we saw across tax and QuickBooks, we actually saw mobile development happening. Today, it's embedded in every experience that we provide. But that actually gave a sense for, this is the power, right? When you build expertise and you're able to actually transform a company through it, that's really the power that I talk about.
So to just
and you
stay
don't need a lot of talent to do that.
But to stay on that thought, right? I just want to kind of ask you a follow-up question on just that idea. You told me a story about how you took that leap of faith. We're segueing from center of excellence and how we're using the guardrails of a center of excellence to go to a platform, right? And you really told me a story about how you took a leap of faith with all the data that you had to open up some of the APIs that Intuit had available, and how that led you to an acquisition in Boise. So help us connect those dots of how a COE takes you there.
Exactly. No, that's perfect. And this actually, as we started building these experiences on top, as we built the mobile app, we realized what we had is a monolithic application, that we took from the desktop and moved it online. That doesn't really help us move fast, because when we were building this new experience on the mobile, we realized we had to scramble to go get access to the logic and the data. That drove conviction that we need to be decomposing, right? We need to be building it using a microservices architecture. We need to be really defining APIs, and we need to not just share it internally, we need to open it outside. So this journey began essentially into its developer platform, and we opened this up, and we have lots of interesting talent around the world that's actually building on top of those APIs. The example I shared is a few developers up in Boise that were building a time tracking app, in a company called T-Sheets, that actually used the mobile phone again, to say, using GPS and everything else, I could actually help small businesses that are mobile, servicing customers, automatically time track, automatically then compose an invoice, and be able to send the invoice out using QuickBooks. And we found that to be a killer app on our platform. Lots of people were using it, and we found that this needs to be integral, into the workflow. So this allowed us to discover talent that's out there that we would have never looked at. And today that company is part of, QuickBooks and part of Intuit. So the whole platform opening, and there are lots of examples like that truly bring the power of, talent that's out there that never really worked for you. You can't acquire everybody, but really it's all about how you could take the assets that you have, the data, the domain experience, and the customer base that you have, and open that up and unlock that value where others will actually help build value on top of that.
Well, thanks, Vijay. So I wanted to kind of, turn the tables a little bit, talk to Sachin. We talked about some good case studies where we had success, things worked out well. But we should, of course, go in with guardrails, right? Know what could go wrong. So maybe, Sachin, I wanted you to, with your vast experience, reflect on what could go wrong in setting up a center of excellence, and what challenges could one face? And what would you ask people if they're in the audience and they're looking to build a COE to achieve scale in a hard to source talent area? What are some of the things that they should keep in mind?
Right. So as you can imagine, we are living through this experience right now, because the center of excellence that I'm building is actually for machine learning and AI. And that is the kind of talent that almost every industry is hungry for. And especially in Silicon Valley and in Bangalore, I have not made an offer to anyone that doesn't have 4 other offers. I'm not exaggerating at all, right? It's that hard to recruit talent. So in a situation like that, I think you asked about some key principles on how do you go about it, right? I think being very deliberate in designing your branding message is crucial, because you can't try to be what someone else who is successful has been. For example, in case of Ericsson, right? I mean, we're not seen as the most modern company because we are in an industry that is not something that everyone understands. A lot of people don't even know what we do. There's a joke in the telecom industry. The only people that understand telecom are telecom people, right? So to be able to explain to a prospective employee what exactly your brand is important. For example, in our case, it's the data. We create about close to 4 or 5 terabytes of data per customer per day. Right, so branding is one thing. The second thing, and this is something that we discovered along the way, it's not something that we set out thinking about. We are bringing people from totally different domains, from finance, from transport, healthcare, all kinds of industries, to make sure that you get your new employees in this new COE to embrace your domain is crucial. We can't have all these machine learning, data scientists continue to remain just mathematicians. You want them to come and embrace your new domain in terms of competence as well as culturally. Appreciate what that domain is, why it is important, and so on, right? So those are the 2 big aspects, I would say. Being very clear about what you stand for as an employer, and finding a way to get people to embrace. I mean, Vijay talked about the boot camp to be able to embrace the whole mobile first paradigm, right? So similarly, we go through a lot of boot camps to make sure that people understand what our domain is.
No, that's a very good point that you brought up, and it aligns with what Amit Fadnish shared earlier when he made his keynote, which is, you can have a compute stack, and then how do you convert that to a platform? A key aspect of that is having access to the right data and access to knowledge of the right domain. So along those same lines, I wanted to kind of shifting from COEs to platforms. A lot of people say, hey, I've got this capability. Let me create some open APIs. Let me make them accessible to everybody. And I'm well on my way. But in the end, if you've got developers who need to use the APIs that you spin out, you need to be, you don't get a second chance, do you? I mean, your end customer is a developer, and you're not going to use a salesperson to sell it to them. They're going to go with their experience. So what words of wisdom do you have of somebody who's saying, okay, I want to create some APIs and take myself to the next step?
I'm an engineer. I myself write a decent amount of code using platforms, not necessarily built by our own company, right? Yeah. I think the integrity of first of all, the documentation around exactly what services are offered by the platform are crucial. Number 2, creating the network effect. It's important for developers to know why it is beneficial for them to come to your platform as against doing something simple by themselves. And the third one is the stability of the API layer. I'm beginning to address an engineering audience here, but the stability of the API layer is extremely crucial. We know of examples where people have actually walked away from better platforms with worse API layers. Yeah.
No, that's a point well made. And do you want to talk about some use cases or platforms you're building in your COE today, Sachin?
So a couple of them, right? I mean, in an earlier role, we were building a platform that was more telecom platform, right? But more to the point in terms of the COE that I'm responsible for right now, let me talk about the use case first and then the platform aspect itself, right? In terms of use cases in the whole telecom domain, it's a very complicated domain. If you think about exactly how, when you make a phone call to someone, it goes through about 30 to 35 nodes in the back end. It's a very complicated telecom function. So to take one of the simpler use cases that is easy to explain but very hard to implement, we are working with one customer. So my COE is actually a artificial intelligence related COE. So what we are trying to do with one of our customers that I can't name yet is we are helping them predict when one of their, I mean, our customers are all telecom operators, right? I mean, the AT&Ts, the smart banks, and the Deutsche Telecoms of the world. So we're trying to help them predict when one of their subscribers is going to go off their network. Most of the well-understood statistic is the cost of losing a subscriber is extremely high for a telecom operator. What we do is they have data about when that subscriber experienced call drops, when that subscriber had low signal zones, all of that data. Based on that, we are able to predict when a certain subscriber is likely to unsubscribe from them and go to a competitor. And the way our customer is going to respond to that is being able to send them coupons. If I know that Anita is going to move away from me and go to my competitor, I send you some coupons so that you stay on with my network, and then I deliver a better experience to you. So very simple use case, but it's extremely complicated to implement. So that is one such use case that we're dealing with. So the second half of your question about platforms, what my group is trying to do is to enable entire Ericsson portfolio. We have about 75 products in the company. The entire portfolio to be fitted with machine learning and AI capabilities where it makes sense. It may not make sense everywhere, right? And towards doing that, initially we are starting with bringing competence, hence the COE, so that we can help different groups discover what they could do with machine learning capabilities in their portfolio and build them. But the eventual, the explosive effect of the accelerator will come when we create a platform with which an ordinary software engineer sitting in any corner of the world in Ericsson can build his own or her own features. Right now they come to us for everything and we become the choke point. But eventually to create a platform with the right set of APIs and all that, so that they don't need to become data scientists to be able to create these capabilities. Hence the platform effect.
No, that makes a lot of sense, Sachin. And kind of coming back to you, Vijay, you also had an example of how you're sort of developing platforms at the next level, enabling people to do all their banking in one tool, how that became an acquisition for Intuit. And maybe that's a related story as well in terms of how you're helping your end customer. I learned something in the process that banks actually don't mind not getting their overdraft charges.
Okay, yeah. I think building on what Sachin was talking about, right? I think platforms truly unlock new opportunities, for you as a company, for the users, new experiences that they can actually benefit from, and more importantly, partnerships. So, for example, just to build on this case, we used to think about our prime monetization model as, we build applications that solve real problems and people would pay for that. That all got changed, when we realized that, with an offering, we ended up, as part of this mobile story that I shared earlier, we wanted to build that capability and we acquired a company called Mint. Mint is a very popular personal finance app on the App Store, which allows you to aggregate, all your finances in one place, and it's a free app. Right? And what we actually do is start thinking about beyond user paid models, right? So essentially this app is free for the end user. So what we have is obviously very rich data, about the people's lives, what they struggle with. And one particular example that I shared earlier was the struggle where a lot of people were actually running out of money on their checking account and ending up getting an overdraft fee. This was an example of how, the COE that I built for AI and machine learning in Israel benefited. We hired a few, fantastic data scientists, and they started looking at the data, and they found an interesting problem. And the problem is, we could actually, the fees that our Mint users were racking up were actually more than $2 billion, right? And this is actually a benefit that we could provide to them by predicting in a similar way when would they actually hit an overdraft situation. And because we have a full financial profile for the user, we could actually even suggest that, you do have money somewhere else, would you be able to move it in and prevent this overdraft that's just about to happen? Or, working with partners and, banks, for example, we initially thought maybe, overdraft fees is a nice line of business for a bank, maybe. They may not be happy with us actually whittling that down. But when we actually talk to our banking partners, they realize that, hey, this actually is improving the customer experience for us. And we do have offerings, right, that can actually help our customers. And so we were able to target the right offerings, right, whether it's a credit line or some sort of an overdraft protection, to the right users at the right time, and actually help massively improve conversion. So when you think about, and we were able to monetize off of this. So when you think about platforms, it allows you to start thinking about not just new offerings and solving new problems, but also new ways for you and your partners to drive revenue. And that to us was a compelling factor. I'll give you a quick example that we're just working on. And that is how platforms, with the data that you have and the expertise you have, can actually bring not just customers to solve multi-sided problems, but even experts. The most recent example I can give you is an experiment we ran on our tax platform, where typically people come to file taxes using TurboTax, and it's a DIY experience, do it yourself. But a lot of people, when they file taxes, also need help at specific moments from experts they can trust to quickly finish their taxes. We've always had these experts, but they would do a DIFM. Essentially they would do your taxes off on the side. Now, why not bring the two together with the power of data, where just when you're hitting a barrier and are lacking confidence in finishing a tax step, we can actually get you an expert live just at that moment to help you within the app solve the problem. This is a multi-sided thing where the experts are making money, right? Contracting services, people are finishing their taxes, and the platform's actually bringing them together, right? And we're making money off both sides. So to me, the platform has been very powerful in transforming our business into something that's very new.
Well, that's good, because what it shows us is between communication service providers or banks, in the end, they're trying to hold on to their customers, not lose their customers, and maximize customer satisfaction. And data plays a key role, right? And of course, how we use that data and access that data is also key. Having the customers consent and rewarding them for their consent, telling them, you give me your consent, exactly, you get something in exchange, becomes quite valuable. So I wanted to maybe talk.
And I just wanted to reiterate that point you just made, which is so important. And we realized that as an important learning from all of this is how can we be super deliberate, about the intent in which, how we use our customers' data, and not just consent, but for example, explaining how we will use the data. So we defined a set of principles about how we will use the data, and using those principles, we inform people. So for example, in the case of bringing an expert in, what data will we share with the expert and why, and get the consent before we make the connect. It just builds trust, and so platforms can actually be a strong driver for building trust in your company.
No, very good point, Vijay. A very good point indeed. I wanted to kind of maybe switch a little bit, because we've got just about 10 minutes left. Leave some time for our audience to ask some Q&A. But I wanted to just say, there's often I run across a culture of people saying, it's my engineer working on my product needs to report to me. Don't have it somewhere in a shared center. Don't have it somewhere in a center of excellence. You haven't run into that, have you? and how do you address it if you have? I'm presuming the laugh means that you've seen that once in a while.
I'm sure we both have seen it. Okay. I think we've got to get away from this mindset, and this has been a challenge for us, right? So we were essentially 9 lines of businesses, the bold vision that we had from our CEO is we need to be one company and one platform. And that's a massive transformation on the people side in terms of mindsets and so on. A couple of lessons that we've learned, if I were to quickly share. One is, in terms of directly addressing the question, if this is my code, to building the mindset of this is my customer, and how do we actually reorient engineers to own the customer problem, as opposed to the code, which is the solution that actually delivers that. So what we had to do is essentially pivot. And today, for example, if you're an engineer joining Intuit, you get to go on this thing called Follow Me Home. We actually take you out to a customer where you observe a problem that the customer faces, come back and actually share insights. So this is to get people oriented around, this is why I'm here solving it. The second one is using data. If I'm actually building code, I instrument it, and I want to make sure that I have all the data to see that customer experience. And we actually make sure that people are looking at the product recommendation score, the net promoter score for the feature or capability they're building. The second realization is to break this notion of ownership of code is change the mindset from ownership to stewardship, right? So I'm responsible for this code, but it doesn't mean I'm the only one that can actually touch it. And so we've introduced notions like open contribution, for example, internal open source. How do we make sure that anyone can actually come in who is consuming, say, the service you're building and be able to contribute code? And you still are the steward responsible for essentially the API, the SLA, the quality of service that you're providing, but you're not the only one actually making changes, right? Anyone can submit a pull request. So how do we change that mind shift to stewardship? Came through delineating the platform and making sure we focused on capabilities and stewardship of those capabilities as opposed to monolithic apps and regions of code, right? So those two actually, it's still a journey. It's never easy.
Yeah.
Quick one to add to what Vijay said. I think you covered it well in terms of the whole COE journey, right? And every new COE, even in a company where all these practices are well understood, starts with a challenge, right? So personally, what I have seen, and it doesn't matter which location the COE is in, right? The COE could be in Silicon Valley where the quality of talent is well validated, well established, and all that. For example, the AI COE that I'm doing is headquartered here. I'm sitting here as well. What I have seen, at least if I have to look at some thematic practices across the COEs that I've been involved with, first one, of course, is the quality and competence of people that you're bringing into the COE, because that eases a lot of conversations. That is number one. Second, there's no substitute to creating a track record, because once you create track records, then it opens up a lot of doors. The third one that Vijay brought up is very, very crucial. We have a term for that, we call it inner sourcing, like open source, we call it inner source, to enable other engineers who are outside the COE to contribute to whatever the COE is creating, a platform or whatever that asset is crucial, because all of us who have been engineers know that we love it when we can create something that someone else can use, even someone that I don't know at all, right? So creating this source of inner source culture, and it's very, very hard to do that. It's not straightforward, because if you open the door just like that and throw the door open for any and every developer to do it, you can actually create a really bad platform, right? So to be able to do it in a controlled manner, but let everyone in is crucial. So those are the three factors I would say.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Sachin and Vijay. That's very helpful.